Hello, welcome to this lesson on images and graphic design. We're going to start off talking about the do's of images and what's recommended. You want to make sure your images are relevant to the topic. So say it was a website for a bakery, you'd have something like this. You also want your images to include real people because it makes whatever you're selling or promoting relatable to your audience. So an example of that. You also want to use graphics that tell a story. So this would be one of those. Clearly there's a story happening, and kind of the advantage to using a graphic is that you can have that story that doesn't always come across in just any photograph. You want to make sure your images are unique, but also realistic. So an example of this is this beach photograph where there's obviously like everyone's been on a beach. It's not outlandish, but it's sort of different than other beach photographs. It's got a pop of color in the dress. They're twirling. So there's a lot of variety in there. It's not your average just standard beach photograph with control and replace the couple, you know? So with that, we're going to move on to the don'ts. You don't want to use cliche or overused images. And you also, again, want them to be relevant. So an example of this is this sort of teamwork photo. It's a nice graphic, again, tells a story, but it's sort of overused to have like these puzzle pieces and stuff. And it's also not super relatable or relevant. What you might want would be something of actual people working together in an office setting or in a school setting, all the teachers working together. It's something that actually relates to it if you were using this for, say, office training or some such. Whereas this is just kind of not relatable to the audience because it's this graphic. You don't want to use images that are too complicated or that have a busy background. So an example of this is this picture where you see those folks talking in the background, kind of detracts from the picture of this woman. So you don't want your background to take away from what's in the foreground or whatever's the more prevalent part of the photo. You want to make sure that that is what stands out instead of your eyes kind of being drawn to, oh, what are those people doing? You also don't want to use images illegally. And another thing is don't expand smaller images. So here we have this small image. Everything looks fine, but watch what happens when I expand it. Now you can start to see the little pixels, and that's because it's in something called raster format, which we'll talk about later. But when you expand an image and can see the little pixels is kind of when you've expanded it much too large. It's much better to get a large picture and either shrink or crop it. These are some image types and some words to know. JPG is the best for photographs, and a PNG is the best for graphics. Anything with a large section of colors, like those graphics, are going to be good for a PNG, whereas a JPEG is going to be much better handled to photos because there's so much like little tiny differences in the colors, whereas a PNG can cover just large sections of all one color. Raster format is the format in which images are made up of dozens of hundreds of thousands of small pixels. Stock is when you have specific images available for free or low prices. And within that sort of subcategory of stock, you can have what's called a watermark, which is a text or logo on an image that essentially discourages you from using it illegally. So if it were a stock image that I had to pay anything from like 50 cents to $100 for, but stock usually tend to be pretty cheap, there would be a watermark on it so that even if I were to try and screenshot it or use it illegally, people would know, whereas to get the watermark removed, I'd have to pay. And that could also be stuff like professional photographers may watermark their stuff, artists, anyone that would be selling images would want to keep it from being used illegally. So then we're going to talk about naming your images, and this is just a tip to help yourself so that you can find them again. So something you don't want to name your image. Image 123 or anything like that, just the default name your computer gives it is likely going to be really vague. It might or might not have the website it came from or some vague description of it, but more often than not, it'll be something like screenshot 1 or whatever. So you don't want to go with that. You want to give it its own name so that you can find it again. So my example here is like airplane clip art, whatever the picture's of. And that's a good one. Great job. Because again, you want to name it with what it's a picture of, or if you're using it for a specific purpose, you could label it as like picture for art project maybe. but you don't want it to be something that you can just never be able to find again, because it's just not worth the hassle it'll give you later to not spend the extra time relabeling it. Cool. Thanks for watching. Go take the quizzes to practice and then take the quiz. Make sure to look at the examples on the thing link as well. Those can be helpful. Bye, y'all.